Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams, joining you here high atop Faroe Field in Columbia, Missouri. We've just seen Georgia beat Missouri 26-22, and yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time, so I feel like we've done a show kind of like this where I just think you're left to say Georgia didn't play very well tonight. And for another week, you're talking about Georgia just not really feeling like Georgia. Like, we got 5 games in the season now, and in 2 of them, Oregon game, South Carolina game, you're talking about a Georgia team that's as good as anybody could have played. There's not a team this year or a team in recent years that could have beaten either of those 2 teams worse than Georgia did when it played them on those particular days. But the other 3 games this year, it's just not been that way. And today, as you know, Georgia was lucky to win this game. And there was a moment like second half where I had to really kind of wrap my mind around the idea that Georgia might lose. They played awful today. Now, credit to them for coming back and, really earning it at the end when they had to win the game. So we're not going to be, negative about the whole thing necessarily. But this was bad. And now you got more games this year where Georgia has been less than its best than you do the other way around here. So I think you just got to kind of call it what it is right now. Georgia played a lousy, lousy game. And I think you're left to try to figure out, well, what do you take from it? And what does this team do particularly well right now? And what are huge, glaring concerns that have to be answered? So we're going to give you a chance to share your thoughts, weigh in on this. Obviously, there's a regular comment section. You just type your thoughts in. We're also going to put a video link right there for you as well where you can click that link. You can join us live via Zoom. And tonight, you can just tell us what you saw. And you can tell us where Georgia needs to improve and what Georgia needs to do to get better. There's a lot of season left, and Georgia's got some big end-of-season goals in front of it. But it's got to play better than it did tonight. Lucky to win this game against Missouri, but almost certainly destined to lose its number 1 ranking by the time these polls come out at some point tomorrow. So early thought from me there on that. It's our Dog Nation Postgame Show. We're presented by the UGA bookstore, and we're thrilled to have you with us here for this today. And let's get Terrence's take right now there as well. Welcome in Terrence Edwards, obviously from the Georgia Bulldogs of the past, one of the great Bulldogs of all time, joining us here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show right now here this evening. Presented by the UGA bookstore. Terrence, what do you see? What did you see tonight? Because obviously you watch this stuff closely. You're a sharp football mind. This was Georgia less than its best tonight, but specifically speaking, why was that? I'm not hearing Terrence. I don't know if we're seeing Terrence or not, but I'm not hearing Terrence. So maybe that's on me, or we tested that earlier, and I was hearing him, but I'm not hearing him here right now. But we'll see if we can get that squared away here, and maybe somebody can communicate and tell me what's going on there on that. But I am not hearing him at the moment. And obviously, last week, Terrence stepped in and worked in place of me for a few minutes when I kind of dropped out there. But for now, we're not hearing Terrence, so we'll see if we can get that going here in just a little bit, and we'll see if we can get that squared away. While we're waiting on Terrence, as I said before, we'll also start lining up your comments there on Zoom there, too. We'll take those live video interactions here today, and we'll read some comments the old-fashioned way there as well, as Georgia really scuffles with its offense and, just had to pull this one out late because – once again, settling for too many field goals in the red zone and, too much of that. Sounds like Terrence may be good now. Terrence, sorry for the delay there, but now that you're back with us, give us your thoughts again on just what was really a pretty rough night for Georgia on the road here at Missouri, a place they were expected to win by more than 4 touchdowns.
Most definitely. I just think there was a tale of 2 halves. I think the first half is the worst brand of football that I've seen Georgia play in a long time. Stetson was off. Just the offense and the field was off. I don't know. I'm not in that locker room to get the vibe of the team, vibe of the week, how practice went this week. But the first half was just a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that was something we haven't seen from a Georgia team in a long time. So I was glad to see that this team stepped up in the second half. Stetson played a much better half than he did the first half. So that's encouraging that you can go on the road and win. So I'm going to take from this game that we went on the road, didn't play our best, and came out with a victory. Like you said, we're probably going to lose that number 1 ranking, but I don't think that's never the goal to be ranked 5 games into the season. I think the goal is to be ranked at the end of the season. So a lot of takeaways from this game had me up in my house kicking and screaming, but at the end of the day, I'm happy that we came away with this victory.
And Terrence, here's what I'll tell you too. You mentioned some of the early moments of this game. Watching the first half here, I came away thinking, I'm just not really quite so sure of a couple things. First of all, I'm not really quite so sure right now who this team's true dependable playmakers really are, because it seemed like they were having a hard time finding them in the first half. And frankly, I don't know why they didn't throw the ball to Brock Bowers more than they did today. This to me is troubling, Terrence, and I'm going to put a lot of what happened today on what I kind of think of as coaches' decisions. Now, listen, these are great coaches, and they led Georgia to a national championship. We're not going to be too hard on them necessarily, but when you're not doing things offensively and you're also not really using your best player, and for a long stretch of this game tonight, Georgia wasn't using Bowers nearly as much as it should, I'm sorry, you got to draw a line there on that. That some of this is not about, player development or player execution. Some of this is about you got to make the kind of coaching decisions, the kind of chess moves that give you a better chance to win. And you're going to celebrate the adversity. Georgia overcame adversity, but some of this adversity today was adversity that Georgia created for itself by not using all of its best players to the best that they possibly could have been used. And I think that Bowers is a prime example of that. Now, he finishes, I think, with 6 catches. He ends up being Georgia's leading receiver on the night. But Terrence, for too long in this first half, they're not getting the ball to him at all. And on a night when you're not moving the ball with the guys that you are trying to distribute it to, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Brock is the type of player that he should get at least 10 to 15 attempts a game. And I know sometimes defenses dictate that the ball go elsewhere, but I'm with you there, Bia. He has to be able to touch the ball on every possession or get an attempt on every possession. I'm pretty sure there was plays called for him, and the ball probably dictated it goes somewhere else. But he's the type of guy that he has to see the ball. He's a versatile player. We've seen him get the ball in running situations. Like, you got to give the ball to him. The screen play that he ran to get us down to the 1 yard line, like with Darnell Washington blocking, that play should be called 12 times a game. Like, that's just a pair that's just hard to stop. And I'm gonna give one guy some kudos tonight, man. He's rounding back into form, and I hope he gets more opportunities. Dominique Blaylock made a lot of big-time plays for us tonight. So I just hope he's rounding back into shape. He's getting confident in his ability. The coaches is trusting that he's back to the Dominique Blaylock that we all love. So I'm ready to see him take that next step as well. And when he got the opportunity to make plays, he made them. So hopefully he's more in the game plan in the upcoming game.
We're going to get a lot of your comments here tonight, so hit us up on that Zoom link in whatever video chat you're watching us on, and we'll get you on the air here and let you share your thoughts about UGA. First up here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show, presented by the UGA Bookstore, is Dorian. Dorian, you're on the air. Go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you saw and what you thought about tonight's game.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Big things that I saw originally was just like the past 2 weeks, very slow starts. So I was just like, hey, how are we going to come into this game? Hey, very slow start. And things looking forward is like, hey, this was Missouri. This was not Kentucky. This was not Mississippi State that we have to go to. So we're going to be going into a lot harsher environments versus higher-ranked teams. I just know we have to be better going forward. So thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, Dorian, I think that's a great call. And you talk about slow starts. And, Terrence, I'll add to that another slow start tonight. Georgia in the third quarter, they get to stop defensively, then they get the football. And this kind of goes back to Dorian's point, although slightly different than what he was saying. Once again, Georgia goes on this long, time-consuming drive. You're chewing up, double-digit plays, about half the third quarter on this drive. You're just chewing this up, and eventually you sort of settle for a field goal. And why does Georgia get off to slow starts in games offensively? Because right now they don't seem to, at least not the way they were early in the season, they don't have that haymaker punch they seem to be able to throw. And in the third quarter tonight, too, when after having a conversation in the locker room, after refocusing your efforts, after re-energizing yourself, you come out here and you just go on this plodding, ball control drive, almost as if you were winning the game and trying to salt it away, as opposed to what was actually going on, which was a deficit you're trying to overcome. This very slow drive. Ultimately, you settle for a field goal, something that Georgia's done too much of as of late. And to Dorian's point, Terrence, I think part of the reason for them some of these slow starts right now is Georgia just doesn't seem to have the juice offensively it had early in the season.
Right. They, especially tonight, the first drive was very baffling to me. Even with the first throw, we tried to throw an RPO to Marcus Jackson, and it just didn't look right. The field just didn't look right. So that play was very baffling to me. Why that was the first play? Like I'm wondering what they thought Missouri would be in. So the field of the first half, well, I never thought we would lose the game, but I was worried because it just didn't. The field wasn't electric to me. It didn't seem like they came out with the same type of motivation as they did against Oregon or even South Carolina. These last 2 weeks, they, to me, have played uninspired. So something has to happen. Hopefully, this is like a test. And Missouri's haven't been the best team, but this goes to show if you not prepare properly and you don't take every opponent and respect them, this is what's going to happen. So I keep saying last week, hopefully this is a wake-up, and I know we got a tough opponent next week. So the team really has to just look themselves in the mirror, players, coaches, everyone, and figure out what is the issue right now.
Let me get Mark. Mark, you're next up on the Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Mark, what's on your mind tonight after what you saw from Georgia on the road at Missouri?
Test 1, test 2, test 3. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, Mark, you're on. You're
Okay.
on. Go ahead, my friend.
Okay, thank you. I was just making sure. So my question is on defense. We look scatterbrained. That's just my friendly way of saying it. And other people will probably say it's something different. But my biggest thing is the Missouri offense, give them credit, they torched us. Second half, we changed it around, especially in those final minutes. But how can we just get back to that consistency and not being torched? So that'd be my question.
Yeah, Mark, that's great. Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for being with us here tonight. Great question. I appreciate that. And Terrence, I think part of the answer to Mark's question kind of relates to the fact that you had Jalen Carter pretty hobbled right now. Now, he did try to give it a go tonight, and then a cheap, dirty play that's going to potentially injure him more, which you hate to see. But beyond that, part of the issue that Georgia's dealing with defensively right now is it doesn't have its best player at 100%. And the absence of Jalen Carter is certainly felt. And around that, you're seeing some good things happen. I think you're seeing Bear Alexander start to come on a little bit as a true freshman, and you like that. And listen, there are moments in which Warren Brinson may make a play or Nazir Sackhouse may make a play, and so you're going to lean on these other defensive linemen right now. But there is no doubt, Terrence, that when Carter's either not in or not in at 100%, right now Georgia is feeling the effects of that, finding some way to get him back to full health. That is a paramount need right now for this Georgia defense.
Almost definitely. When you have a guy that's going to be a potential top 5 pick and one of the best D tackles in the game, it's certainly a loss to lose that type of talent. I honestly think I've really enjoyed watching some of the younger D linemen play. Warren Brinson have made some plays. Stackhouse, like those young guys have made some plays, but they're not Carter, and they're not potential top 5 picks for a reason. They're very good players, but they're not Jalen Carter. So once you lose the best player on your defense, everyone that's around you have to pick up the slack, and they're just not as talented as him. They're not a force as him. And now defensive lineman does not have to worry about Jalen Carter, and you have to double team that guy. Then other players are leave single block, and when you're single block, you have to make the play. And now, not having that guy, now you can see the difference in our run defense.
Back to the phones. We're going to go in just a moment. Before that, though, let me remind you, this is the Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA Bookstore. And don't forget, Saturday before the Georgia-Auburn game, great lineup of guests signing autographs there at the UGA Bookstore, right next to the Tate Student Center, right across from Sanford Stadium, from 1 to 3 p.m., leading into kickoff at 3:30 p.m. between the Dogs and the Tigers in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. How about great former Georgia quarterback Buck Bellew there signing copies of his brand-new book. Vince Dooley there at the UGA Bookstore, as he is on so many of those Georgia game days. Malcolm Mitchell on hand there as well. It's been fun to have him there at the UGA Bookstore a lot this season. And as well, coming up on Saturday, the great former Dog Lindsey Scott, who was the hero of the 1980 win for Georgia against Florida. Buck Bellew, Lindsey Scott in the same place at the same time. I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but if you want to get over there and get both those guys to maybe sign the same thing for you, got a piece of autographed memorabilia that you'd like to see both those UGA legends kind of sign their name on at the same time, I think that'd be a lot of fun. So that is Saturday at the UGA Bookstore from 1 to 3 p.m. ahead of Georgia taking on Auburn. But for now, though, we got business to take care of in terms of trying to figure out what went wrong for Georgia in a game that was far uglier than it was supposed to be against Missouri here today. Garner, you're next up on the Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Garner, what did you think about what you saw?
I just think we should see more of the run game, and I think we'll see more in the Auburn and Tennessee game, in my opinion. But a better question is this the Stetson Bennett issue going to continue on to the other games with the issue in the first half?
Yeah, Garner, thanks for the phone call. I appreciate that. Let's talk about both those issues, Terrence, and let's do the Stetson Bennett part of this first. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I don't think that Bennett played his best game tonight. And at the same time, Terrence, there were a lot of moments tonight where I also didn't see what I thought was great separation for the guys that he was throwing to. So, you know, as I said before, I think you're certainly well within your rights to say that Bennett didn't play a very good game. But for me, some of that's hard to separate between an offensive line right now for Georgia that's having a lot of struggles. And you make the list of the biggest issue that Georgia has right now, it might be along the offensive line. I have no idea who this team's best five is. Devin Willock comes into the game tonight as a replacement for Tate Ratledge. That's a huge shock to me because Ratledge was a guy that I had circled with a Sharpie before the season began as one of Georgia's best dudes, and it just hadn't happened. I don't know if it's injury-related because obviously he missed all of last year or if he's just getting beat, but he has not been what I thought he would be. So my point here on all this is let's have the evaluation of Stetson Bennett. That's what shows like this are for. But in addition to that, I thought Georgia's offensive line played lousy tonight. And a lot of times in which there were misfires in the passing game, I'm just not really seeing guys create that separation and attack the football the way that I kind of want them to there. That I think you can kind of diagnose the issues with the Georgia passing attack from a lot of different angles. What do you think about what Garner said there first on the idea of Bennett and what's going on with the Georgia passing attack right now?
Well, like I said earlier, I think this is the worst half I've seen Stetson play with as far as his accuracy. I mean, there's a lot of screen plays that was to McIntosh that he just overthrew the running back out the backfield. He just did not look comfortable in that first half. And, great players always come back in the second half, and he played a hell of a game in the second half. That shows the type player that he is, and I can respect the guy not playing his best, then leaving it all out there in the second half and leading his team to victory. And for us, the offensive line standpoint, I just don't see that pop that we usually have. I don't see that push. I will give them credit for that 4-minute drive. And if people don't know what the 4-minute drive is, it's just when you're just trying to seal the game. And can you run the ball down someone's throat when the defense know you're going to run the ball? And we ran the ball well to kill the clock. And Eltworth's got to get more carries, man. It seemed like he's the closer. He's the guy that has the vision, has the power. I didn't think Kenny had his burst tonight with his thigh injury, so I didn't see that explosive, but he did run the ball well. Outside of the fumble, I thought Kenny Milton ran the ball well, but I think Eltworth right now has been our best back these last few games.
Let's go back to the phones. Richard D is one of our great Dog Nation commenters. We see him on a lot of our shows, and he joins us here live in person via Zoom here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA Bookstore. Richard, what did you see with these Dogs here tonight?
Well, obviously, like you guys have been talking about, Stetson was off of his game in the first half. But what I really want to focus in is on the defense. I mean, there was a lot of missed tackles, but they definitely kept us in the game. And more importantly, Malachi Starks made the biggest play of the whole game when he stopped that run from going into the end zone on the 1 yard line. And then that followed up with a penalty, and they only had a field goal. That's the 4 points difference in the game. And that, in my opinion, that's the biggest play of the game.
Richard, I think you're absolutely right, and we haven't really brought it up yet, but I'm glad that you did. Starks doing that. There was also the other play, too, where Starks almost got the interception and didn't, and actually by not getting the interception, he probably preserved better field position for Georgia because the punt that took place after that was a bad one. Now, if you're Starks, you can't anticipate all that, but that's an example of an interception that you didn't get that actually probably worked out pretty well for Georgia the way that it did go down. But, to Richard's point, Terrence, there were some things to like from the defense here tonight. For me, though, it is another reminder that Georgia's just not going to line up on a per-play basis and just jam teams the way they did last year. They're going to be, they're going to give up a little bit more this year. And so, once again, the same way I'm kind of challenging coaches, hey, you can't let Brock Bowers just kind of sit there and rot. You got to make sure you're using him because this is one of the best players in the country. On a night when you're not doing much offensively, you got to get that guy involved. I think defensively it's the same kind of thing here too, where, if you're giving up more on the ground, if you're giving up more big plays than you're kind of used to giving it up, well, maybe you got to try to find a way to sort of dial up more pressure. You got to try to find a way, to get an elite athlete in a situation where you can kind of wreak some havoc there, and that's a button that I think that Georgia's got to push. And nobody talks about this, Terrence, but that's something that Dan Lanning was good at. 2020 with Azeez Ojulari, 2021 in a national championship year. As a defensive coordinator, there was an embrace of the pass rush that existed with Lanning that didn't exist before him, and it remains to be seen if it's going to exist after him. I think one of the things that Georgia needs to demonstrate here, as you start to think about the second half of the regular season coming up, the first half of the regular season ends this upcoming Saturday against Auburn, but it's not just the 5 first-round picks that are missing. It's a defensive coordinator who I thought was pretty good about moving the pieces around the board during the game, especially over the course of the last couple of years. I think we're about to find out how much Georgia misses Dan Lanning right now.
Right. I just think one thing that I've seen on the defense so far is we are not garnering any kind of pressure on the quarterback. And that's troubling to me right now. It's you can't ask those guys in the back end to cover as long as they've been covering. We have to get pressure. I just don't see the natural pressure that we've gotten. I mean, we could bring one more, but then our secondary would be susceptible to the big plays. Or I don't know if we're trying to keep everything in front of us or just trying to get there with 5-man pressure. I just don't know what the pressure package is right now. We're not getting pressure just with our front 4 right now. We don't have Jordan in the middle. We don't have those guys on the edges right now. And I think Nakobe Dean was the best blitzing linebacker I've seen, how he's able to get skinny through the gaps and cause penetration up the middle. So that's one thing I think that can hurt us, especially with a team like Tennessee coming up who pushes the ball down the field vertically. You're going to have to get pressure, so you cannot have the quarterback taking 5- and 7-step drops and throwing the ball downfield and just having time to survey the field, go through its first, second, and third read. We need to garner more pressure to get more turnovers in the secondary.
Let's check in with Savannah Dave. Savannah Dave, you're on the Dog Nation Postgame Show, presented by the UGA Bookstore. Savannah Dave, what'd you think about tonight?
Well, man, it looked to me like Bennett and McConkey were still tight, and maybe it was a holdover from the last game. Once we were behind and we had to just throw everything out the window and actually play. Then Stetson settled down and he started hitting guys. I mean, McConkey got hit right in the hands early in the game and dropped the ball. And Bennett was throwing balls all over the place. It wasn't very accurate. But in the second half, everything settled down. I think maybe we got all this stuff from that Kent game out of our system after the first half of this game, and I think we're okay now.
Dave, that's a great call, and I appreciate it. And he brings up the moment with Ladd McConkey earlier in the game, near the beginning when he has another drop, which was a holdover from last week. And Terrence, I don't mind telling you, when I saw him come back out and drop what I would think of for McConkey, a pretty easy one that we're used to seeing him haul in, I got to tell you that I got a knot in my stomach about that because, listen, nobody wants Georgia to win more than I do, and our audience kind of feels the same way. And obviously McConkey's a big part of the story for Georgia. And, like, you can kind of write off what happened last week as everybody has a bad game, no big deal. But all of a sudden, if you're bringing that same thing with you into the next game, well, now this is a thing. Now it's sort of in his head. And you kind of wonder, it's like, in golf we call that the yips. Or, sometimes you see this in baseball too, where you can't throw the ball at first base or, just, little easy things that you're used to being able to do. And you sort of wonder there for a moment, does McConkey have some sort of mental thing going on? Well, the truth is, after that one drop, he shook it off and he actually ended up having a pretty good game for Georgia. I'd say certainly making you forget about the drop from earlier. But Dave's right. At the beginning of this game, and for a large portion of this game, this seemed like a tighter version of Georgia than anything we've seen in quite some time, where I do think they felt the pressure of being on the road. And, Terrence, you played. You know how this is. I can tell you, being in the stadium that's right behind me here, that over the course of the evening, the belief started to build. And, I talked to a bunch of Missouri fans before the game today, and there was not a single person that thought they were going to keep it close at all. And pretty quickly, that feeling completely changed, and these fans got into the game. This was an SEC football game that Georgia played in tonight. I'm not quite so sure, what kind of talent Missouri has in comparison to most of the SEC. But in terms of the vibe you got inside Faurot Field, you really felt that. And I think that Dave's point there kind of speaks to this, is that Georgia was a little tight in responding to this for a while, it seemed like.
Oh, most definitely. And, we definitely know that Georgia did not play their best game today, but I'm going to have to give a little props to, and especially their defensive coaching staff tonight. They did a great job of dialing up blitzes, and the defense played a heck of a game. So, we weren't out there playing against ourselves, and we know that, Missouri probably don't have the best talent, but they played very well tonight. One of the kids, number 99, George Regis, played for me at Pace. He was a fullback, went to Miami with Coach Rick, and now he's a D tackle from Missouri. So they just got a lot of guys that are just good football players on that team, and they played tonight. There was a good opportunity for them to showcase the world and try to shock the world and knock the number one team off, and they came close to doing it. So I'm going to give them a lot of credit. But for that first half, especially that first drive, we definitely looked tight and uncomfortable.
Let's go back out to the phones. And, of course, if you're watching us, whatever video chat you're watching us on, Facebook or YouTube or dognation.com, there should be a link right there that you can click on. You can join us live. We've had some great calls tonight. It was not a great game, but our breakdown as far as our callers has been excellent. And, of course, that continues now. Our buddy James Lawson. James was with us on the Dog Nation cruise last spring, and we always appreciate his perspective on UGA. James, tonight wasn't very much fun, was it?
Well, first of all, I guess what I'm going to say is let's just breathe real quick, right? Take a deep breath. The Braves won. The Dogs won. And I think 5-0 feels a lot better than 4-1, right?
Most definitely.
For sure.
All right.
What else do you think about tonight, James?
We definitely made a lot of adjustments there in the second half, and being somebody that's not all that familiar, I've never played football or anything. What sort of adjustments were we making that made the difference there? Other than just being more physical than the other guys.
That's a good question, James. Thanks for joining us. And, Terrence, how about from you? What did you see on that in terms of those adjustments? I will tell you, Israel Troop, former Georgia wide receiver, I thought had a pretty interesting tweet along these lines where he was talking about how calm Kirby Smart seemed in the halftime interview, and he was predicting that Kirby going into the locker room, not going to turn over tables, not going to peel the paint off the walls, that was going to try to calm Georgia down more. So beyond that, Terrence, and it did seem like it was a little calmer version of Georgia in the second half, were there halftime adjustments that you saw Georgia make here today, to go to James' question?
Yes, from the running game standpoint, they went away from the zone running and went to gap schemes. So that gap schemes means a lot of pullers, a lot of power runs there in the middle. So that kind of stops the run-throughs from linebackers and defensive linemen. So the running game definitely changed from a zone-based running to a gap scheme running. That's one adjustment that offensively we made. And I just think Stetson just settled down, and he calmed his team. And I think Israel Troop was right that Kirby wasn't that fiery. He was calm, and I think that's the demeanor he took into the locker room, was very calm and demeanor that we're going to win this game. We just have to play better. It's on us. We're self-inflicting our own, per se, fumbles, penalties, missed throws. Just settle down, play football, and we'll come out with the victory.
Well, speaking of the running game, which did get going in the second half, especially in the fourth quarter, Dejon Edwards a part of that. Some tough, hard yards late, a touchdown there as well. We'll make Dejon Edwards our player of the game, presented by Wilson PC, personal injury attorneys. Georgia probably does not win today without Edwards, so this is a guy that has been a player in previous years used late in games when Georgia was already up big, but today in a game that Georgia needed more points to secure the victory, Edwards was one of the guys they called on to help get those, and so he was equal to that task tonight, and for that, we'll make him our player of the game, presented by Wilson PC, personal injury attorneys. And, of course, Atlanta can happen out of nowhere. And for those of you that live in the Atlanta area, you know how crazy it is on those streets, and when it happens to you, you're involved in some sort of accident or somebody does something crazy to you on the roads, you need to be made whole again. You need to be made right again. Our friends at the Wilson PC, personal injury attorneys, can help you with that. You can give them a call at 888-838-YOU-WIN. That's 888-838-YOU-WIN. Or you can find them online at atlantahappens.com. I do enjoy that website, atlantahappens.com. Very funny way of framing just how crazy it is to be on these roads. Accidents sort of happen out of nowhere. And when something like that happens to you, your first call can be to our friends at Wilson PC, personal injury attorneys. Find them online at atlantahappens.com or give them a call at 888-838-YOU-WIN. That's 888-838-YOU-WIN. So congratulations to Dejon Edwards on that. And thanks to all of you who keep giving us great phone calls here. Reaction to what was not admittedly a great game for Georgia, although pretty good perspective from James there a moment ago. Dogs still undefeated. Dogs still with all those end-of-season goals in front of them, to be sure. Next up is Gigi. Gigi, you're next up here on the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. Gigi, thanks for your time, and tell us what you thought.
Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you?
Like, oh, forget. I'm on.
You're on. You don't have a great signal. Go ahead and try that one more time, though. Let's see if we got you now. Go ahead. Yeah, Gigi may have had a little bit of a bad signal there on that. So, Gigi, if you want to hop back in here, we can get you back in here. If you get a better signal, we'll get your thoughts here and get you up and rolling. And, of course, happy to have all of you here on the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. And don't forget, next Saturday, not only great autograph guests, as we told you about earlier, but a great chance to get stocked up on the UGA apparel you need. Peter Millar, Vineyard Vines, Johnny O, the Nike coaches gear. You want to look great in some Dogs gear. Best place to get that is right there at the UGA bookstore, and you can get some great Georgia apparel, do some great shopping, and if you aren't able to be there in person, you can still have your shopping experience at the UGA bookstore when you go to UGAbookstore.com. Shop 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, right there online at UGAbookstore.com, and you can check all of that out. We're going to hear from Georgia coach Kirby Smart from his post-game press conference coming up here in just a moment. Let me also read some traditional comments here. I'll go to YouTube and get a few folks over there, what they're having to say about tonight's game. Tennille says, my thoughts are so confusing right now. I can understand why there could be some confusion. The truth is, Terrence, this is just not the Georgia that we've seen earlier this year. Now, it's also a long year, and maybe over the course of time, Georgia does kind of go back and look like that team again, and maybe when Georgia plays in bigger games, it's going to rise to the occasion in a way that it did not do tonight. But I'm not going to do what I think you and I both did after 2 home games of, it doesn't really matter that much, overmatched opponent, you're not going to have the same level of focus. Well, at a certain point in time, you got to sort of, as Dabo Swinney used to say, you got to bring your own guts. You got to bring your own focus. And I'm not going to write off tonight's game as, hey, you can't hard to get up for a team like Missouri. I mean, trust me, this crowd was breathing down Georgia's neck tonight. This was a chance to get up. And for a while, I kind of questioned just how capable Georgia was of rising to that moment. So Tennille says she's confused by what she saw. I kind of understand why she would be.
Yes, I'm definitely not going to use that same sentiment that I've used for the Kent State game and the Sanford game, that you can't get up for those type games. This is a big SEC opponent. This is another team that's in a way of stopping you from your goals. None of us think Missouri is going to do very much in the East. They played tonight. If they continue to play like they played tonight, they would definitely go to a bowl game, but not a contender. And they gave us all we want. So we definitely got to get our stuff together, look ourselves in the mirror, and figure out what's going on. Because, like you said, 3 games we came out and not played our best. 2 games we played flawless. So we got to get back and figure out what we did against South Carolina and Oregon to get back to unanimous number 1 team, or we're going to continue to play the way we played. So I don't think I think this is a blimp. It's not a trend. We go out against Auburn and play this lackluster again. Maybe this is the team that we are, and not the team against South Carolina and Oregon.
Southern Dog says on YouTube, got to get this offensive line fixed. And honestly, that might be the biggest takeaway from today's game is this is an offensive line for Georgia right now that's not performing very well, putting Stacey Searles squarely in the crosshairs on that, and also I think putting more pressure on Todd Monken. Okay, you can only go with the personnel that you have, and if this is what you have right now, you're going to have to coach in such a way to mitigate against an offensive line that's just not moving people the way that Georgia offensive lines have in the past. Samson joins us here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show, presented by the UGA Bookstore. Samson, how are you? And what'd you think about what you saw tonight as Georgia slips past Missouri, but pretty in pretty ugly fashion?
Hey, BA, it's good to hear from you. I can barely hear you, just so you know.
You too.
I tried to turn my volume up. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Can you have Dog Nation add the link again at the bottom so everybody else that's trying to get in can get in?
Okay, we will do that. We'll make sure we put that in there again on all the different video chats and get folks in there. Samson, thanks for that. And what else did you think about what you saw tonight?
Still there, BA?
We may have lost Sam. Yeah, go ahead. What else do you think about what you saw tonight?
God dang it.
What do you think about what you saw
me?
tonight? I sure can. Go ahead.
BA, the team is young, and it really showed tonight. We struggled for the last 2 weeks. That's clearly what we all talking about. Yes, Georgia's really struggling and struggling hard, and it's going to take some time. But we're getting to the meat of our schedule, so that's going to be the biggest challenge. We got no time to mess up. But I still got a lot of faith in this team, though. I still got a lot of faith in this team.
Great call, Samson. Thanks for that. We'll make sure we put another link in to the various video chats so folks that maybe missed that from earlier can get back in there and get into that. And, Terrence, let me use Samson's comment there to kind of spin this in a more positive direction here for a moment. As he says, hey, a lot of young players are asked to grow up on a night like this. So, Terrence, how much can Georgia use this when you do have to dig deep and when you do have to, this is the first competitive snap that Georgia's played in forever. If you want to, a couple of the official particulars on that, first time they've trailed all season long, first time they've been down double-digit points to begin a game since the SEC championship in 2019, largest fourth-quarter deficit overcome since the Peach Bowl at the end of the 2020 season against Cincinnati. So Georgia did a few things tonight they just hadn't had to do very much of, which was play from behind. Terrence, how much of an opportunity does that give young players to grow up, knowing that this was these were the most competitive snaps that Georgia's played in all season long? How much does it help you, if at all?
Oh, it helps. Now you've been put in a position that you're behind. You're not playing with the you're not in the catbird seat with the lead. So now everything tightens, everything heightens. So everything you do has to be perfect. So I think you put these young Georgia players in a position of, okay, you got to be technical sound, you got to be mentally sound, and you got to execute the plan that's called. So if I'm gonna take a takeaway from this, it helped us in the form of when we get down, fans, the players, the coaches can understand that these players are not gonna fold. They're not gonna give up. So that was a good thing to see that we got down by double-digit points, and those kids did not quit. They continued to fight and claw and scratch, and everything they did was help them win the game tonight. So that was I love that aspect of the game. But to be where we want to be, we can't put ourselves in these positions to try to dig ourselves out of them.
I want to read another comment I thought was really good in just a moment. Before that, though, let's go to Ryan Walker. Ryan joins us here tonight on the Dog Nation Postgame Show, presented by the UGA Bookstore. Ryan, your thoughts on the game? How did you feel about the Dogs?
What's going on, BA? First off, you do a great job every day.
Hey, Ryan.
I'm the guy that gives you the nickname of the great montages of commentators. Honestly, I call it for what it is, man. We came out lackadaisical, missing tackles on defense that we shouldn't have been missing. I know that you were talking about getting Brock Bowers involved, but, you know, I used to play back in the day myself. But outside of that, let's just say it like this here. The hot hand tonight, the two hot hands on offense tonight were Darnell Washington and Kenny McIntosh. And outside of those guys coming through in the clutch, everybody keeps forgetting about Dominique Blaylock. He made a couple of key catches on these drives that we were actually sustaining in the second half. You know, Darnell's got to get more involved in this offense. I know you preach about Brock Bowers, but Darnell's a mismatch for anybody, and they have a hard time with tackling. And shout out to Jack, shout out to the kicker tonight. He kept us in this game, you know, didn't miss anything and was perfect with his kicks tonight, man. So that's all I got for you tonight.
Ryan, great call. Appreciate that. And your point about Darnell is a good one in that when he has that catch, you know, kind of in the red zone second half, and he took a wallop, but honestly, I was more worried about the guy that hit him than I was Darnell, because Darnell's a building. You're not going to certainly, you know, hurt him with something like that. But Terrence, you know, I would like to have an honest conversation with someone who knows. Obviously, you know, you're not going to get a chance to do this with the Georgia coaching staff necessarily, but you know, like, why isn't Darnell a bigger part of this? You know, did have a couple of catches tonight. He's clearly a good football player. Everybody has said he's clearly had a good, you know, kind of run up to the start of the season. That's continued. He's being praised for kind of what he's doing during the week there as well. So how do you turn 2 catches into 5 catches? How do you make him? I mean, and I'm not going to apologize for this. I do think that I believe that Brock Bowers is by far and away Georgia's best offensive weapon, but it doesn't mean that Darnell Washington couldn't be its second most effective weapon in the passing game there too. And you know, it seems like he does kind of have that 2 or maybe 3 catch ceiling right now, and it's not really end zone. It's not really touchdowns. And if you want to say that you're seeing more talent from Darnell than what his touches are indicating, okay, so why is that? I mean, do you have an answer as to why that might be?
So I'm going to take it from this aspect. I think everybody equates touches with catching the football. And I think the Georgia coach staff sees a plan for him. He does give you 2 or 3 big catches a game, but he's also a mixed match in the blocking game. He does such a great job blocking in the inline blocking and also perimeter. So I look at his for the team. It's not necessarily just catching the football. He's out there doing all the little things that does not show up in the stat sheet, but he's having a great time. If you just look at him celebrate when he make a great block for Brock or one of the receivers, he's having just as much fun as catching the passes. So he's in the game plan, necessarily not with the catches, and I would love to see him to get more attempts, but I think he's having a great season, just being an overall great teammate and a great player.
And I'll tell you this, too. I know this is not a night when people really want to be positive, but Ryan brought up something I think is really important here. File this away. Dominique Blaylock had 2 real big catches tonight. I'm not quite so sure this might not be one of those things where we look back on it and say, oh, yeah, Blaylock, you know, started looking like himself again after 2 years of a lot of injuries. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle of everything else that happened tonight. But Dominique Blaylock gave this team 2 big catches here this evening.
Oh, he definitely did. And I was looking at the stats. I think he finished with 3 catches tonight. But I think the biggest catch when a guy was draped all over him, he snatched the ball out the air. It was a 3rd down, and he got maybe 8 to 9 more yards. So he played a great game tonight. He's rounding back into form. So hopefully, I know we're preaching that Brock, you know, get the majority of the attempts, and which he should. But Dom has been one of those guys that I've loved since his freshman year, and that's one thing that I was going to talk about tonight and that's why I said when I first got on with Dom made some big key plays. It wasn't a lot, but the plays that he made was very helpful for us winning this game tonight. So he's rounding back into shape. I think the coaches is getting the trust back in him. I think he's actually taking some snaps away from Kieris tonight. So if he continue to, just make big plays, he's going to be a big part of the game plan. He's going to get more opportunities later in the season.
We're going to hear from Kirby Smart here in just a moment. His thoughts after the game. Before that, our buddy William Green joins us on the Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA bookstore. William, a lot to digest from this evening. What was your key takeaways?
I got 3 critical takeaways. First and foremost, the adjustment from zone to gap should have been done a lot faster. Basically, Missouri was heel lining, sending guys from the edge, and just coming in and messing up the mesh point, the timing. Everything was off because Missouri did a great job of disrupting in the backfield before things could get going. The drops problem, I think, is something I'm going to keep an eye on. I mean, Rosamy's first pass from set was a little off, but it's very catchable. And the lad catch or lack thereof was really, really bad. I'm glad they built up towards the end, so that's the positive takeaway. But I really think we need a reset from top down, and maybe everyone was tight, not just the players, because there were a lot of adjustments that we ended up making, but it took halftime to do it. So.
Green Soldier, that's a great comment. Appreciate you being here. Excellent breakdown. Terrence, what do you think about that in terms of, hey, just maybe a little bit too much tension and maybe some of that kind of coming, as he says, beyond just the players in the game, but the entire team? Kirby has certainly talked about composure muscle and having to work on that. Well, today was a day to try to find that because I'm just telling you right now, this, for me, Terrence, started off being, wow, Georgia's not playing very well. And somewhere along the way, especially when Georgia had to settle for a field goal in its first drive in the third quarter, all of a sudden I started thinking, gosh, this may be South Carolina 2019 all over again. Georgia may lose this game, that you had to dig deep and you had to find it tonight in order to be able to win. So it was an interesting test of your emotion because I'm sure for a lot of these players, it ran the gamut of emotion on all that.
Right, it did. And, I'll just, for the second half, I just go back and look at the second half, and that's a testament to this Georgia team. Yes, I think we started tight, and it could have, been a byproduct of the top down being tight. And the players kind of sensed that, and they played tight. But I just take the second half. That's a championship-level performance in the second half. You're not playing your best in the first half, but you continue to fight, claw, and scratch your way back into it, knowing things was not going your way. You're not playing your best. I think individually, they know they wasn't playing their best. Stetson know he wasn't playing his best, but to go out and perform the way they did, outscoring Missouri 20-6 in the second half. You could take that's a positive. That the kids did not give up, did not hang their head because things was not going their way. So I'm gonna take that, and we could, as the coaching world say, we could flush the first half. Let's concentrate on the second half and look at the positive. But we cannot continue to have those type first halves. If we want to, get back to the college playoff, before the college playoff, even play like that against Auburn or Tennessee.
I wanted to read a comment, and I'm going to do this, and we'll get Kirby Smart right after this. And I was trying to give credit to the person who sent it. I don't see it now. There was an altercation before the game started, Terrence, where Jalen Carter was involved in that. And this particular commenter said a moment ago that if Nakobe Dean was still on this team, there's no way Dean would have tolerated that. Do you think, like I said, I was actually outside the stadium when the altercation occurred. I've seen the video, but I don't really know all the context around that. But it's an interesting statement to make that, hey, if you're kind of pushing and shoving, and I guess some people thought that maybe, Carter had a role in how this all got started. Like I said, I'm only going by secondhand information because I didn't see it myself live and in person. But that is an interesting statement to, hey, maybe you don't have quite the same level of focus as last year's team did if you are kind of getting in those sort of pushing and shoving matchups, before a game started. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is an interesting way to look at this, I think.
Well, I'm going to take it a step farther because I don't know what started the altercation. I don't know, who was the aggressor in this. But, the comment said Nakobe Dean. I think Jordan Davis, because they're in the same positional group. Nakobe Dean might not even be around to even stop that type of altercation. I think Jordan Davis was such a leader, especially for that D line. He would have been able to stop this and got Jalen out of there, or maybe this wouldn't even happen if Jordan Davis was around. So I wouldn't put Nakobe Dean in that leadership position because he could have had his linebacker group someone else, because I didn't see any other positional groups around but the D line. I would go more Jordan Davis would have stopped this before he even got started.
Kadarian Jones on Facebook says, hey, we got to put this behind us and get ready for Auburn next week. And obviously, Kadarian, that's exactly what Georgia's going to look forward to doing. And I know a lot of Georgia fans themselves will be ready to see the Dogs back between the hedges next week and feeling much better about their team, hopefully, than you feel after seeing them on the road here at Missouri tonight. By the way, speaking of that, as I told you before, UGA bookstore, big place to be before the game next Saturday. 4 big autograph guests. Lindsey Scott, the hero of the 1980 Georgia-Florida game on hand. Buck Bellew, former national championship quarterback. Malcolm Mitchell there as well, signing copies of his brand new book. And, of course, legendary coach and athletic director Vince Dooley on hand there as well. It's from 1 to 3 p.m. next Saturday. Of course, also not too soon to start thinking about some of that holiday shopping there as well. And you want to get decked out for all the Christmas needs that you have, or let the folks that you love get decked out this Christmas season. The UGA bookstore's got you covered on all of that too. But for now, we're going to get you covered there as well. You've heard Terrence Edwards' thoughts. You've heard my thoughts. We've even heard a lot of Georgia fans share their thoughts. We can do some more of that before we're done. But how about the coach himself? What did Kirby Smart see of what he saw? His team struggling far more than expected in beating Missouri tonight. This is from his post-game press conference mere minutes ago.
2 things we talk about in this program all the time is composure and resiliency, and we had to OD on those tonight because we certainly didn't start very well, didn't start in very good field position, but look, I couldn't be prouder of our guys. At halftime, nobody blinked, nobody questioned. It was the most together I've ever seen our team, and the theme this entire week was do it for your brother and do it for each other, and I thought they hung tight and did that. And with that said, there's a ton of things to clean up and a lot to get better, and I would be remiss if I didn't give Eli, his team, Missouri Tigers, the atmosphere they had tonight, some kudos too. They played really physical, really hard, and whipped our butt up front. But I'm proud of the way our guys played. And when we had to run it, it's about the only time we could run it when we had to.
Yeah, I was getting at those 2 drives to end the game. Is that you've had a lot of big drives your teams have over the years, but where's that one rank up there?
I don't know, because I hate that we had to do that, because it begs the question why they couldn't do that earlier. And the determination that they showed. We always talk about rising to the competitive nature of an opportunity, and the opportunity arose tonight, and they answered the bell. But if we don't answer the bell earlier, then we won't be a very good football team. We've got to improve in those areas, and it's not like we haven't been working on it prior to tonight. We've seen some of those things show through, and give Missouri a lot of credit. They tried to make us one-dimensional, and it was tough. It was tough sledding tonight. We didn't have our best night for sure.
Kirby, what can you say about what your defense did in the first half when the offense was struggling so much, limiting Missouri even to just 16 points in that first half?
They should. I mean, just be honest. We got better players than Missouri up front on our defense. I hate to say it, but we do, and Eli knows that. He did a great job running the ball, managing the clock. He shrunk the game. I thought he did a phenomenal job attacking and taking shots. But our defense rose up. Give Schumann, Muschamp, the defensive staff a lot of credit. They stayed aggressive. There's a lot of players hurt out there. Devin Carter went down. We got guys dinged up. Warren Brinson's dealing with growing. Smiles out for a while. I don't know how long he was out, but there was a series of plays. He's out. I mean, we got Tresman out there. It feels like he's on one knee, and he's struggling. He doesn't get to practice much during the week. So, I mean, they fought. And the biggest play of the night is probably the Malachi Starks tackle on the 1 yard line, or whatever it was, 1 foot, because it allowed us to stop them, and we have played good red zone defense. I'll give those guys credit.
What does it say about Malachi that he makes a play like that as a true freshman?
Well, it says he's got a lot of ability. I mean, we didn't fit the play right, but we had 2 guys bust on the play, just things we don't do. But for the most part, we bottled up the run. I think if you took that run out, we controlled the run game all night. But that's a big play for Malachi. I think he tried to strip the ball out.
How about Jack's not Kirby? Jack Hennessy.
Oh, unbelievable. When you said Jack, I was like, who? God. It was the pressure. Think about the pressure on each one of those kicks. Now I feel for the kid, just repeatedly putting him out there in those pressure situations, and he's so confident, and just he has a way about him. He has a routine he really believes in, and he was the MVP of the night. He and Dejon Edwards for sure.
What are you guys thinking on Jalen?
Kirby Smart press conference. You want to go to the Dog Nation YouTube page, you can watch that in its entirety. What Kirby Smart has to say after a win tonight for Georgia against Missouri, but a game in which Dogs not play very well, although you did hear some positivity from Smart related to the fact they didn't see his team wilt in that moment. He talked about how closely connected and together they were and all that there a moment ago. So you want the full press conference, you can get that on the Dog Nation YouTube page. Watch that in its entirety. We'll also get some more of your comments here to kind of wrap things up here in a bit there as well. First, though, let's go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. We'll take a look at big scores from the SEC today, also top 25 action as well, including a halftime a USC team getting more than it wants right now from Arizona State. This is not expected, but for second consecutive week in Pac-12 play, USC is not exactly dominating right now. Elsewhere, you go back earlier today, Ole Miss holds on to beat Kentucky 22-19. Really one of the great games of the day, back and forth between both these teams. Ole Miss gets kind of a signature win there at home. Kentucky gave it a hard fight, but ultimately losing there in that spot. Lane Kiffin after the game also had kind of a funny line about how well his defense played, given the fact that Kentucky's got the number one NFL draft pick on its offense. Obviously, kind of a line mocking some of the hype the Kentucky quarterback Will Levis has gotten. So that from earlier today, a little bit of chatter on that. Alabama goes on the road against Arkansas and kind of gets the flex win that it has needed, has not really been able to do, prior to this. Obviously did not look very impressive against Texas and didn't really play anybody of note before or after that. But against a good Arkansas team on the road here today, pretty dominant was Alabama, winning 49-26 there. Elsewhere, Mississippi State, a team that Georgia will see on the road later on this season, handles Texas A&M easily, 42-24. That's the final. So if you're a Georgia fan thinking about future road dates for these Dogs, obviously a game like that, it becomes even more important because pretty clearly it's going to take a better effort against a team like Mississippi State than it took to beat Missouri here today. Georgia obviously not playing particularly well there in that spot at all. Other scores of note, probably one of the big stories today is the fact that Oklahoma was completely blasted by TCU. 55-24 was the final there. Auburn was up for most of the night on LSU. LSU did come back and secure that win. So another disappointing loss for Brian Harsin, that era there at Auburn. They were not able to hold their lead, ended up losing today to LSU. Of course, Auburn, the team that Georgia will see next Saturday. We got some time for a few more thoughts here, and we'll give you a chance to kind of have your traditional comments read here. I'm on the Facebook page here for a moment. Jeff Ingram saying, "Do you think Jimbo Fisher may be on the hot seat?" I tell you this, Jimbo Fisher needs some wins. And, I sort of thought Mississippi State was going to win this game anyway. That was one of my official picks, taking the Bulldogs here. They were the favored team today. A&M was actually the underdog, despite the fact that they were the ranked team. Mississippi State wasn't. Mississippi State was the favored team in the game. I think that right now Texas A&M desperately needs some wins, and I think their fans are probably starting to wonder, all the hype that comes along with what's been going on here, and it's just not resulting in much in the way of success on field. I think that's probably a pretty fair point. I was also doing our cruise around the SEC there a moment ago, and I forgot to remind you that this is a great time to start thinking about cruising. Let me tell you, after a day like today, I feel like I sort of need a vacation. When I'm thinking about a vacation, there's no better choice for me on that than a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And there's time for you to be on the cruise with Dog Nation. We had James Lawson join us a little earlier, one of our video commenters tonight. James was on the original Dog Nation cruise, so it's good people having a good time. We'd love to have you on board with us for that too. Our good friend Jessica Slater, she's the travel agent specially selected by Royal Caribbean to help us book the cruise that we're going to be taking. You can go to the website that she's made specifically for our Dog Nation cruise, royaldogs.com, and you can find out more about the Dog Nation cruise. You can also see the number right there on your screen and just give Jessica a call, answer whatever questions that you might have about this great event. We're going to be on Independence of the Seas. We're leaving out on April 24th of next spring. Going to go to Nassau in the Bahamas. Perfect day, Coco Cay, that beautiful private island, and we'd love to have you be there, a part of that. A lot of Dog Nation Daily folks are going to be there, but for the crew that joins us here late on a Saturday night for the Dog Nation post-game show, we know y'all are party people, so we definitely want you. If you're at 12:30 local time, if you're 12:30 local time, watching the show, then that means you like to have fun, and so I'm hoping we'll see you on the Dog Nation cruise coming up this April there as well. All right, final comments, and then we'll get ready to wrap up here for today. Kadarian Jones, I was talking about Dell McGee and his future as a head coach in Canada at Georgia Tech. McGee's one of those guys that I think at some point in time should get a chance to be a head coach. I'd like to see him do that. Now, my preference would be not at Georgia Tech. I think the main thing about the Tech job is and Terrence, I'll give you a chance to respond to this too. It's sort of hard to know who Tech might hire as its head coach until you know who its athletic director is going to be. That person is going to be tasked with hiring that next coach, and until Tech has an athletic director in place, I think any kind of commentary about who the next coach is going to be is probably just speculation, just because it's the athletic director that's going to make the hire, and the athletic director is not in place right now.
Dale name.
And we may have lost.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Terrence, you're good. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I can't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, just hot coordinators right now, hot coaches' names to be thrown on. But like you said, until Georgia Tech gets an AD, I don't think they will even have any potential candidates for the head coach position. They have to kind of secure that AD first, then you'll get guys in there. I don't see Dale at Tech. I can see Dale at Auburn if that situation occurs. But those names will get thrown out because of the great job they have done so far in college football.
So Cody Ledoux checks in on YouTube to say, are you worried as a Georgia fan about Tennessee or Arkansas? I think they can really give you a good run for your money. Well, first of all, unless Arkansas miraculously wins the SEC West, Georgia's not going to be playing Arkansas this year. That's not on Georgia's schedule. And as far as Tennessee goes, I don't know that. I mean, I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed with the way that Georgia played tonight, but it doesn't really change my overall outlook about the season for Georgia. And an Alabama fan, which Cody is, should probably understand that as well as anybody. Last year, Alabama played an awful game against Florida, an awful game against Texas A&M. They lost Texas A&M. Trust me when I tell you, Alabama played worse last year against Texas A&M than Georgia played against Missouri tonight. They did because, frankly, Texas A&M last year wasn't very good. So you had the loss to A&M, the near loss to Florida, played awful against Auburn, did not play particularly well against LSU. When it was all said and done, Alabama was still national runner-up. That I don't know that one game necessarily predicts future games as well as sometimes people want to act like it does. So does tonight's game make you more worried about Tennessee if you're a Georgia fan? Maybe so, but you're going to have games when you play great. You're going to have games when you don't play great. The perfection's not the standard here. We've said that before, that the standard is simply being the best. Last year, Georgia had a couple of instances which didn't play particularly well. If being imperfect meant you couldn't be a champion, then Georgia wouldn't have been a champion a year ago. And the team that finished behind Georgia, Alabama, if being imperfect meant you couldn't be a champion, they couldn't be a champion either because, as I mentioned, they had several blemishes a year ago in terms of how they play. So ultimately, for me, Terrence, I don't know that. While I am incredibly disappointed with tonight's game, I really am. And I think the Georgia fans, if they want to let it rip and talk about all the things they hated, I think you're well within your rights to do that. It actually doesn't change for me very much my overall feeling about this team, other than saying they just got to play a lot better than they did tonight.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, just take the Missouri team. I mean, if you look the way they played last week against Auburn, and they should have won that game, but ended up losing against Auburn, and a lot of us thought this wasn't going to be a game, but they came out and played a whole different brand of football. I mean, last week was like, man, the kicker missed a 26-yarder to win that game, and he come out tonight on fire. So there's game-by-game situations where you just can't take the prior week and say what the next week is going to be because these are kids. So to say we're going to come out and not play as well against Auburn because we haven't played well for the last 2 weeks, I don't think so. Or will we play this well against Tennessee? Tennessee is a team that likes to push the ball downfield. So my only concerns for the Tennessee game is pass rushing. I think we'll be able to score against Tennessee, but do we get a consistent pass rush on Hooker that he won't be able to look at his first, second, third receivers or make plays with his legs? So that'd be my only concern against Tennessee and any team going forward. I know Ashford this week, the Auburn quarterback, likes to run around a little bit. So can we keep him in the pocket this week and make him a pocket passer? Those are the things that I'm going to be looking at necessary for the next two games is can we control the two quarterbacks? And then can we run the football better against Auburn and Tennessee?
Make these our final comments on DogNation.com. HunkerDown93 says Stetson's grown more during the offseason than anyone. A whole different mindset on how he plays the game compared to just last year, let alone 2 years ago. And I think in some respects that's true. I think there's also some moments tonight in which Stetson could have maybe given Georgia a little bit more. And Terrence, I guess I would also add to that too is I think one of the most effective plays, much the same way there are three things that I think that Georgia needs to do more of than they did tonight. Now, somebody mentioned Darnell Washington earlier. A few people did, and I'm fine with that there as well. But my particular list is you got to get Kenny McIntosh more involved in the passing game. You can't have any game in which Brock Powers is not the focal point of your passing attack because I think he's just proven how valuable he can be. The third thing for me on that, Terrence, is I think you got to run Bennett more. He's had a rushing touchdown in every game leading up to tonight. Did not have one this evening. Now, the overall rushing numbers don't always look great because the sack yardage gets factored into that, and it kind of hurts his overall average. But if you take those out, which the NFL does and college football should too, I mean, Bennett running the football is actually one of the most efficient plays this team can execute. So those are three things. When you're in a bind like you were offensively tonight, let Bennett do it more with his legs. Find a way to throw the ball to Kenny McIntosh as you did during the Oregon game. And make sure that Brock Bowers is involved on every single series, every single drive, every single point in the game. Those are the three things I would like to have seen more from Georgia offensively because I think in most cases those three things can be executed without stellar play from your offensive line, which right now you're just not getting.
Right. I think Missouri did a great job on a couple wheel routes. We did try to hit Kenny McIntosh on. They did a great job of covering him out of the backfield. But with him tonight, I just think it was his thigh injury that prevented him from being the explosive Kenny McIntosh. He did break off a couple long runs, and he ran the ball very well, ran behind his pass. So I just think we have to get him healthier to see the best version of him. And like I said, Brock has to be the number one target. But also, I just think Dominique Blaylock is another receiver. Kirby mentioned we got to get some receivers healthy. I think Dom is a guy that have really warranted more opportunities. I think he's a guy that can make plays. He can make contested catches, which we saw tonight, and he can get open and get separation. So I just think Dom is one that, as the season progresses, I think he's the one that's going to actually do more. And with Stetson Bennett, people say you just look at him just being different. It goes back to trust. I don't think that the Georgia staff trusts him 2 years ago to, once we get out, to be able to change plays, put us in plays that give us the best chance to get positive yards. I just think the team trusts Stetson that he's going to make the right play, and using his legs is a right play because that's a play that you can't defense. That is another element of the game that defensive coordinators have to worry about. And that's when you can't rush. So having a weaker offensive line right now, and if you move Stetson around, defenses cannot rush because if you pass the quarterback, a running quarterback, he's just going to hit one of the lanes. So all of that, I agree with you, BA, all of that must happen for this offense to be the explosive offense that we think it should be.
Terrence, great stuff and a great place to leave our conversation here tonight. To all of you who tuned in on our Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA bookstore, appreciate your commentary. Obviously, tonight wasn't the most fun conversation we've had all season, but we also believe there are plenty more fun days in the weeks to come, and we'll look forward to those better circumstances. From here in Columbia, Missouri, on behalf of Terrence Edwards back there in his home in Georgia, I'll say thanks to all of you for being here, a part of our Dog Nation post-game show. I'll see you next Saturday back in Athens. Come by and see us at the UGA bookstore. We'll put you live on air the same way we take our Zoom callers, we'll put you on air. I'll give you a chance to speak right here into this microphone and tell us what you think, hopefully about a much better performance from UGA and hopefully a big crowd response to get these dogs fired up between the hedges there next Saturday. Thanks for being here on our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. We'll look forward to seeing you again next time.